Hey, what's good? My name is SATURDAE, and this is part 2 of my EDM production series. It's March 17th today, and I was in the middle of uploading part 1 of the series, and then I got a notification that Serum 2 just dropped kind of out of nowhere. So I kind of stopped everything I was doing and downloaded the newest version. If you aren't aware what Serum is, I kind of talked about it in part 1, but it is a very powerful synthesizer. This update's insane for a couple of reasons. One, if you already own Serum, it's a free update, which is absolutely insane. And two, if you're just now trying to buy Serum, you'll automatically get version 2 at the same price. But this synthesizer is insanely powerful, and they added so many new functions that people have been asking for years with Serum 1. I'd already finished editing the first video by the time this released, so I wanted to address it in this video, and I'll be retouching the synths that we already made in part 1 with Serum 2. So I just wanted to throw a little disclaimer out there before we get going. And also, I was able to download and test out Free Clip 2. I think it's a pretty decent upgrade from Free Clip 1. It has a zoom function, which to my knowledge, the first one didn't have, which was kind of frustrating. So you can actually zoom in on the transients and see what you're doing and how much you're clipping a lot easier. And to my ears, it sounds pretty transparent. It's pretty decent. I definitely still prefer K-Clip 3, just in terms of functionality, having a wet and dry knob, being able to audition what you're clipping. Like there's just a lot more there, but you can still achieve really good clipping for free with this plugin. So I would still absolutely recommend this if you're on a budget and just getting started. With that being said, let's hop into the video. All right, so now that we've kind of done an overview of Logic, I kind of want to hop in and start doing some drums and getting that going. For drums, I always start with the drop. I like to do this because the drop for me is the most important part. I feel like if the drop is lackluster, then the song kind of falls flat. Whereas if the drop is really good, it only enhances the song that much more. So what I'm going to do is I am going to open up Splice because, again, I have this downloaded. I have this app in my little toolbar up here. So I'm just going to open this and we'll go to Browse. Now I'm just going to grab a couple of quick drum samples and just drop them into the project real quick. I just want to make a quick loop. I don't really care what they sound like necessarily. So I'm going to quickly sort by, I'm just going to go EDM. Let's see how this sounds. Yeah, browse a little. There, that one should be okay. It's a little punchy. I'm not going to be super picky with this right now. That little plus just downloads it. So I am going to drag and drop this into my project. So there's two different ways I can go about this. First way is I can drag and drop the sample into the project. So you'll notice it automatically created a audio track for us. Now, there's another way that we can manipulate this, and that's by dragging this. And when you hold it into Logic, you'll get this icon on this notification on your left-hand side, and it says drag audio files here to create instrument tracks. So by holding this, I can select Drum Machine Designer, and I release. And now it'll automatically create this sampler. So if I close this window, I can go in here, right-click, and choose Create Pattern Region. If I do something like this, whoops. I'm just going to mute this top track. I'm going to turn both of these down a little bit. And I just held shift to click those, by the way, and mute that. So let me pull this out. And now we have this. Sounds pretty terrible, but that's fine. So we have right here, I'll repeat these notes real quick too. Let's do. So now we have two different forms of the same sound, and we have audio and we have MIDI. I kind of want to talk about what the differences between the two of these are real quick. It's actually pretty easy to understand, but audio is just a recording of waveforms. Now, neither one's inherently better or worse than the other. They just have different functionality. So there's certain situations that you'll use them in over the other. So there's three main pros I would consider for audio over MIDI. The biggest one is that audio is a lot less CPU intensive than MIDI is. So when your projects get really big, these will just be way less taxing on your computer power than MIDI will. We'll get to that later, but that's one of the biggest pros to using audio. The second thing is that it has a lot more functionality for time stretching and you're able to do things like tape stops with them, which you cannot do with, you can kind of do it with MIDI, but you have to kind of like program it in weird. For ease of use, it's just much faster with audio. You can do like fade ins, you can do fade outs. There's an algorithm we'll be using called flex time that you can time stretch these pretty easily. You can reverse it. You can slow it down to do tape stop effects. You don't have any of these capabilities with MIDI. It's not there because you cannot do that with MIDI. And the final thing that audio is really good for is visualization. If we zoom in on this waveform, we get a lot of information here. We can see there's a sharp transient. It kind of drops down. Then you can see the body, and then you can see the tails. So just looking at this, I know that one, there could potentially be a phase issue here. But I also know that the kick comes in pretty hot and pretty loud. It has a long sustained body, and then it tapers off with a like a sub. And I can tell that just by looking at this without even hearing it. With MIDI, we just get a rectangle. Like you can open up the sampler to look at the waveform. But once you start doing things like compression, limiting, or clipping and rendering stuff in place, it becomes a lot more apparent what your changes are doing and how you're manipulating the sound than it is with MIDI. Now, there are a couple of cons to using audio. One is that you're limited to what the audio region contains. Now, I kind of loaded in a preset piano, so I can kind of illustrate the difference between audio and MIDI a lot easier. So just give me 1 second. Okay, so I made this piano chord that was made in MIDI and then converted to audio. So one of the main disadvantages to audio is that I cannot manipulate this chord. So this was a rendered version of the MIDI, and if I hit play, it's a little A minor chord. I cannot change this note. I can transpose it up, I can change the scent of it, I can change the key, but I cannot change the actual structure of these notes. And earlier I was talking about how you can't change the structure of the chords with audio. With MIDI, so here's that same chord before it was rendered to audio. So exact same chord. So say I wanted to change this chord from an A minor to an A major, I can go in here and I have these little like rectangle MIDI notes, and I can just move this up. I'm just gonna hold Option and press up, and it'll move it up. And now I have an A major instead of an A minor. So I'm way more flexible with what I can do with MIDI in that regard. You can also add more notes with it. So it's very good for like customization. It's also very good for quantizing quickly and getting things on beat. So say I recorded this in, this is slightly off, this is slightly here, and all the endings are a little bit different. I'm gonna press Command A real quick, and I can go up to here and quantize it. We'll say 1/8 notes, so it just snaps it right there. And additionally, I can hold Shift and Option, and I can just drag them over like that, and now they're all uniform. So it's very good for doing stuff like that very quickly. The whole reason I'm able to play this piano is because I'm using a sample library that requires MIDI. I'm playing on my MIDI keyboard right now to make these notes. Now, there are some disadvantages to using MIDI. One of the big ones is that it is very CPU intensive. Later on in the course, I'm going to go over ways that we can kind of mitigate that, but as a general rule, when you're using heavy CPU intensive things such as Serum and you're doing a lot of complex and advanced automation with it, it'll start using a lot of your CPU and you'll run into issues because of that. The other main con to it is you can't do time stretching style things like tape stops or fade-ins. You can, depending on what you're doing, like if you're using a synthesizer, you can artificially create those within the synth itself. But as far as MIDI is concerned, you cannot do that with MIDI. So to quickly wrap up which you should use, neither's better. They just both have their own unique purposes and uses. And you should generally be using a combination of both where it fits correctly. Just know their limitations and their benefits and use them whenever you need to. There's not like a right or a wrong one. Okay, so let me delete these and let's get back to these drums. I'm kind of weird and I like making my drums with MIDI. From what I've seen, most people use audio for it, but I'm just more comfortable using a drum sampler. So let's grab I want to grab like a clap, and we'll grab a open hi-hat. Clap. And this one sounds fine. Okay, so I'm just going to drag and drop this in here. Okay, and now I'm going to grab a hi-hat. I'm going to go hats. I'm going to do open. Just going to grab. Perfect. Sounds good. Okay, so let's drag and drop that in here. And you'll notice because I added these after, I'd already added in that kick, there's only one appearing here. But what I can do is erase that region, create a new pattern region, and now the other two show up. So I'll just, because that took me 2 seconds, I'll just do this. We're going to do claps here. We'll do, whoops, let's do this. All right, so we have this basic drum pattern now. Let me make this loop longer. All right, and now what I want to do, this is going to be a little weird. I'm going to just drag this drum loop to bar 25. I just know that that's probably where my drop's going to be. Most of the time when I make music, that's where my drop's at. So if it changes, it changes, but I just kind of want to get it out of the starting area. And now we are going to open up Serum, and we are going to make a melody for our drop. So that can be found under AU Instruments, and then you can go to Zypher Records, and there's Serum 2. Now this looks a little overwhelming. If you've used Serum before, it should look very familiar. It just has a few added features. If you haven't before, we're going to do a deep dive on this, but for those that have, the main difference is there's a couple really great ones. One is you get a third oscillator now. You also get a second filter. You have 8 macros instead of 4. You have this clip, which operates as almost like a DAW. You can like draw stuff in here and export it. You also have this arpeggiator that's really, really sick. You have this whole mix window, and you have buses. Your effects, they added a bunch of new effects in here that are really cool, and the coolest thing is that you can now duplicate your effects. So you can have as many instances of stuff on here as you want, which is amazing because that drove me insane on the last version. Matrix is pretty much the same from the first one. It just looks a little more polished. And global is a lot more polished as well. Most of the stuff that you would normally use in here is now relocated into your oscillators. So if you like click here, this is most of the functionality that you used to use in the global settings. Now, because it's so new, I'm still going to be using presets from Serum 1. And there's this preset by Heavy Bass House Volume 1, and it's this bass knock star that I wanted to use. So I'm going to import that. And you'll notice right when I imported that, there's all this information that got loaded in. Let me leave this window. There we go. So it automatically imported all of this information for me, all of these effects, which are also compatible with Serum 1. Or sorry, they're compatible with Serum 2. So before I hit play on anything, I'm going to turn on in part 1, we talked about adding this low latency button. I'm going to activate that just so when I hit a note, oh my God, that's super loud. I'm going to, toggling low latency mode just makes it so there's no delay. Like without it, I'm pressing the key right now and it happens. With it off, there's like a half-second delay between me touching the note and it playing. If you don't have a MIDI keyboard like what I'm using, you can do Command K and bring up your musical keyboard to make notes. But I am going to quickly just make a melody with this preset, and then I'll be back in a second. Okay, so I came up with a melody, so I'm going to press R to record, and I'm also going to hit, okay, never mind, my metronome was off. So I'm just going to hit R to record and try and get this in somewhat on time. Okay, so that sounded pretty bad, but because it's MIDI, we're able to manipulate this pretty easily. So what we're going to do is I'm going to quantize this. So I'm going to do 1/16 note, and you'll notice it snapped all of those on beat. So let's hit play. Let me turn this down, it's super loud. Okay, so one of the main issues is back here because it needs to go lower, but boom, boom, boom. I think it needs to be here and here. Let's try that. Okay, it still sounds bad, but we're gonna fix that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select all of these notes, just holding shift to do that, and I'm gonna hold shift again. Oh my god. And I'm gonna hold shift again and option to make them all the same length. I didn't select this one because I think this one goes here. All right, let's play that and see if it sounds better. Okay, so that's still off. So I think this goes, is it that? Okay, so this last note is just short. So it just needs to go here. And now I'm gonna trim this so that it goes directly here. So it's even. And now we have this nice little loop. And you can press L to make regions loop like that. If you go to the top of your region when you have a loop on, it'll do this little like arrow, and you can drag that to change the loop length. I'm just gonna make it to 29. And one thing I'm gonna do real quick is I'm just gonna make these uniform so they're the same velocity. I wanna adjust those later, but for now I want them to be the same. So I'm going to choose in this functions menu, you have to go to piano roll to open this up by pressing either E or P. And I'm going to choose fixed velocity, and I'm just going to do 100. I don't think the notes are selected. If they weren't, you would hit select and operate. I can hit operate. It doesn't really matter in this case, but now they're all the same velocity. So I'm going to close this menu. I'm going to turn this down a tiny bit. Okay, so now we have these notes that are the same velocity, and it sounds perfectly in time. So now I'm going to make this loop a real loop by holding Control and pressing L. And now we have two separate regions instead of a looped region. Now I'm going to copy and paste this right here. And then I'm also going to make two loops here. Okay, so now that that's duplicated, what I want to do is I'm going to extend this loop the whole length. And the reason I'm doing this is with the genre I make bass house, the drop will hit, there will be your like main drop part, and then it essentially goes into like a drop B where it kind of changes up, and then it rotates back to A, and then it rotates back to B one last time before going out into like a bridge or a transition or straight into verse 2 or whatever. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up with the part B bass real quick. So I'm going to hold Command and press D to duplicate this track, just so I have another instance of Serum. And there is a bass I want to use, and it is... and it's John Casey Future Beats Volume 2, and it is Classic Killer. And I'm going to turn this down a bit. It sounds like this. So I'm going to record in a couple of notes real quick. I'm going to start from over here. And something to know real quick too about the metronome. So you'll notice you can hear it kind of loud there. You can toggle that on and off using K, and you can also control click in here to go to metronome settings. I have mine turned up a little bit louder with a little bit of a brighter tone so I can hear it more, but that's where that is. I'm going to turn it off for this though, and I'm going to hit record. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I am going to just clip that out because we don't need it. You'll notice when I did that, you saw that first note disappear. That's because if I open up the piano roll, you'll see it's not there. But then if I drag it, it's here. That's just because the note was extended a little bit past there. So that'll happen to you sometimes. So just be mindful of that. So this is already quantized. I'm just going to quickly move this note back so that they're the loop's even. And now we're going to do the same thing as we did last time. I am going to Option Shift to make them all the same length. And then I am going to go Functions. I'm going to go Fixed Velocity. We'll choose 100. select and operate. All right, and we're all good there. And then I'm also going to make a loop here, do that, and make them real regions. And now we have a loop that sounds like this. So this bass, I like the tone of it, but there's something I want to do to it real quick just to get it like, I don't want to go into like fine tuning or anything, but I want to add something really quick to give it a cool effect. So I'm gonna add an insert. So this is where you're gonna put plugins on all of your tracks. So I'm gonna go in here and I have a plugin called Kickstart 2 that I'm gonna use for this. I'll show you how to do it for free with the stock plugin in Logic as well. All this is it's a sidechain plugin, so it automatically pumps the volume. So this is essentially what it sounds like. Just makes it like less aggressive and gives it a cool like pumping feel. You can change like your mix, so how much it's pumping. You can change the rate. Kind of cool. Later on in the series, I'll show you how to do that with Logic stock compressor as well for free. So I don't want to like dive into compression just yet. But one thing I want to wrap up with is that how I added this as an insert. We're going to be talking about routing pretty soon, but just know that your this is called your signal chain. So Serum is routing through here, going through all your plugins, going to your fader, going to if you're panning left or right, and then it is getting output to, for example, here it's going stereo out. So there is a flow to how you put things in a certain order. We're going to be doing that a little bit later. Right now, I'm just doing kind of like songwriting and organizing. But this is the rough drop that we have right now. Obviously, it's going to sound terrible because we have like 5 things going and no mixing, but... All right, so that's going to wrap up this video. In the next one, we are going to kind of do a general outline for the entire song. We're going to start adding vocals, various other synths, and a little bit of sound design and mixing. If you have any questions, post them in the comments, like, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.